The Royal Hong Kong Regiment, formed in May 1854, was a local auxiliary militia force funded and administered by the colonial Government of Hong Kong. During the imperial age, home defence units were raised in various British colonies with the intention of allowing regular army units tied up on garrison duty to be deployed elsewhere. These units were generally organised along British Army lines. The first locally raised militia in Hong Kong was the Hong Kong Volunteers, a forerunner of what was to become the Royal Hong Kong Regiment. Although the British government as national government was responsible for the defence of the territories and colonies, and held direct control of military units raised within them, the local forces were raised and funded by the local governments of the territories, and as such the RHKR was always a branch of the Hong Kong government. It was not a part of the reserve force of the British Army. The RHKR did however form part of the ORB-80 of 38 Gurkha Infantry Brigade and were under command of the commander of the British forces in Hong Kong. These locally raised defence units met British military standards in organisation and efficiency. Many of the officers and NCOs attended training in the UK. Although colonial overseas British territories auxiliary units may have no tasking under the British Ministry of Defence, and members may not be compelled to serve outside the territory, many serve voluntarily on attachment to British regular and territorial army units. The regiment should not be confused with the separate Hong Kong Regiment formed in 1892, which was a regular infantry regiment of the British Army, recruited in India. History. The beginning. The Hong Kong Volunteers was formed in 1854 when the Crimean War led to a reduction of the British military presence in Hong Kong, to help bolster the defences at a time when marauding pirates were still a hazard on the China coast. A call for local volunteers was made. A total of 99 Europeans were recruited, mostly British but with some Portuguese, Scandinavians and Germans also answering the call. However, almost as soon as it was founded, it was disbanded when the threat of war in Europe receded, and regular units of the British Army were once again able to resume responsibility for the security of Hong Kong. In 1862, the Hong Kong Volunteers was re-established, and in 1864, they were called out to help subdue a serious outbreak of rioting between British and Indian soldiers. In 1866 it was disbanded again. In 1878, the Hong Kong Volunteers was reborn as the Hong Kong Artillery and Rifle Volunteer Corps. By 1917, it was renamed as the Hong Kong Defence Corps, was actively engaged in guard and patrol duties during World War I when, owing to the recall of the British forces, they were the only military unit left in Hong Kong. In 1933, the Hong Kong Defence Corps acquired the first armoured car. It was equipped with an armour-plated body and mountings for 2 machine guns. Later, 4 others were bought by the colonial government. The bodywork was outfitted by the Hong Kong and Whampoa Dock Company. These armoured cars all played an important role in the Battle of Hong Kong in December 1941. World War II. The Hong Kong Defence Corps, renamed the Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps, met the severest test in the bitter fighting that took place in the crucial weeks before the fall of Hong Kong on Christmas Day 1941. On date, December 1941, the HKVDC deployed a total fighting strength of 2,200, all ranks in 7 infantry companies, 5 artillery batteries, 5 machine gun companies equipped with Vickers machine gun and an armoured car platoon. While only seeing light action in the new territories at the beginning of the Japanese attack, the volunteers were heavily engaged on Hong Kong Island, especially during the key battles of Wong Nai Chung Gap and Stanley. Casualties among 3 Khoi at the former and 1 BTY at the latter were extremely heavy. 1 and 2 companies also suffered heavy losses, as did 5 BTY. Out of the mobilized strength of 2,200, 289 were listed either as missing or killed, and many others became prisoners of war. Some, however, made their way into China, where the British Army Aid Group was formed to assist the Chinese government in the struggle against the Japanese. A number of these men later made way to Burma, where they joined the famed Shindads under General Order Wingate. The services of the Defense Corps were later recognized by the award of 19 decorations and 18 mentioned in dispatch for gallantry and good service. As a recognition of the Hong Kong Volunteer Defense Corps' defense of Hong Kong during 1941, the Corps was awarded the Battle Honour Hong Kong. Post-World War II, in 1949, the Hong Kong Regiment were reorganized and became part of the Hong Kong Defence Force, which also included separate air and naval units. In 1951, the new Combined Defence Force was granted the title Royal, and replacement colours were entrusted to the care of the regiment as successor to the defunct Defence Corps. In the early 1960s, the role of the Royal Hong Kong Defence Force changed from that of an infantry battalion to a reconnaissance regiment equipped with 6 British ferret armoured cars were acquired. The regiment was reorganized to form a headquarters squadron, 3 reconnaissance squadrons, an infantry company and a home guard company. During the 1967 leftist riots, the Royal Hong Kong Defence Force were called out during the 6-month disturbances in Hong Kong. By 1970 the naval unit was phased out, and in 1970 the Royal Hong Kong Defence Force was itself disbanded, the 2 remaining member units, the Hong Kong Regiment and the Hong Kong Auxiliary Air Force, officially becoming separate entities. At the same time, both were granted the royal title by Queen Elizabeth II, and the words "The Volunteers" were incorporated into the Hong Kong Regiment's title. With its new title and colours, the RHKR was reorganized as a light reconnaissance unit operating under the command of the British forces overseas Hong Kong. In the late 1970s, the Volunteers were deployed to assist the civil powers over the problem of illegal immigration from China, but as the problem grew, from 1980 till 1992 the Volunteers were deployed to man the defenses of the Chinese-Hong Kong border. In the late 1980s to early 1990s, the Volunteers were deployed to support the colonial government in controlling the flood of Vietnamese illegal migrants, commonly known as the boat people. This included guarding temporary detention camps for Vietnamese migrants. Organization: the regiment included several units: Regimental Headquarters, Headquarters Squadron, A, B, C, D, Sabre Squadron, Home Guard Squadron, Training Squadron, Band, Junior Leader Corps. The end. The Sino-British Joint Declaration on the question of Hong Kong as a British colony was finalised, and the Joint Declaration was signed in Beijing on the 19th of December 1984. On the 27th of May 1985, instruments of ratification were exchanged and the agreement entered into force. It was registered at the United Nations by the British and Chinese governments on the 12th of June 1985. In April 1992, the security branch of the Hong Kong government formally announced that the regiment would disband in September 1995. Successive changes of titles: 1854 Hong Kong Volunteers, 1878 Hong Kong Artillery and Rifle Volunteer Corps, 1917 Hong Kong Defence Corps, 1920 Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps, 1949 Hong Kong Defence Force, 1951 Royal Hong Kong Defence Force, 1961 Hong Kong Regiment, 1970 Royal Hong Kong Regiment. Equipment. Vehicles. List of vehicles used by regiment from 1920s to 1960s. One-wheeled armoured car on Thornycroft chassis 1930 locally built. Motorcycles with Vickers machine guns. One armoured car on Ford chassis with Vickers MG 1920s for Mounted Infantry Company. One armoured car on Dennis chassis 1925 modified by Hong Kong and amped Whampoa dock for Mounted Infantry Company. Four armoured cars on Bedford chassis 1941 built by KCR. 6 Ferret Scout cars 1963. 2 Land Rovers. Land Rover Defender from British Army units stationed in Hong Kong during 1970s to 1990s. Weapons. Lee Enfield Rifle Mk4. L1A1 self-loading rifle. Colt M16 rifle. Colt Commando M177 assault carbine. SA-80L85. Sterling submachine gun 9mm L2A. FNMAG general purpose machine gun. Brunel MG. Browning 0.3-inch machine gun. Remington Model 870 shotgun. Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Badge. The regiment's badge at disbandment consisted of St. Edward's Crown, 2 Chinese dragons as supporters but without a crest. Motto: Nulle secundus in Oriente. Earlier badges had a Tudor crown and the Volunteer Corps had no oriental features. Tudor crown. Ribbon with the regimental name. Coat of arms of the United Kingdom within the ribbon. Motto: Nulle secundus in Oriente. Laurel wreath. Related organizations. Hong Kong Adventure Corps. The J-Corps was a youth organization created by the RHKR in 1971 and now renamed Hong Kong Adventure Corps. The Royal Hong Kong Regiment Regimental Police. The RHKR-RP was an internal police force within the RHKR to provide security and law and order within the regiment. The Royal Hong Kong Regiment Association, created in 1995 as a charitable organization to support former members in Hong Kong, with clubhouse located at the Hong Kong Jockey Club Happy Valley Racecourse.